channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Friday, and for today's video, I have a thrift flip for you guys. I grabbed a few more items out of my stash and created a sunflower themed vignette for today's video. I hope you like it, and without further ado, let's get to today's projects. So here are the items that I pulled out of my stash to work on for today's video. And the first project is going to be the set of candle holders. I picked these up a while ago at the Goodwill, and for whatever reason, they were very textured. And when I threw them into my sink of hot soapy water to wash them before I put them in my stash, a lot of the texture came off. However, not all of it did. So I ended up having to go over these with some 220 grit sandpaper to just smooth them out and make sure that any of the remaining texture was off of them. Once I'd finally gotten these sanded all nice and smooth, it was time to move on to giving them a good base coat of paint. These had been painted white at some point, but the coverage was really not very good. So I wanted to give them a nice solid base coat. And so I'm using some Rustoleum 2X spray in the color Espresso. Now, I'd already decided I wanted to paint these with DIY's color called Layered Chocolate. And honestly, I could have put that paint right over the existing finish on these. The DIY paint stick to just about anything anyway. But I always like to have a nice solid base coat underneath whatever I'm going over, just in case I do decide to do some distressing or anything like that. I want to be in control of the color that's underneath my paint. Now, in this case, I'd already decided that I really didn't want to do any distressing. So I am starting off by stippling or pouncing on the layered chocolate paint. And the reason I am pouncing the paint on rather than brushing it on is number one, I really don't care for too many brush strokes on my pieces. And number two, I think it gives a really nice beautiful even texture to these candle holders that will hold on to a little bit of wax nicely. So when I go over these with a colored wax, it will show that texture off just a little bit, which I like. And of course, one of the beautiful things about the DIY paints is that they are a little bit thick, which allows you to create texture on your pieces like this. And although the paint is very highly pigmented, I did have to give these 2 coats of paint, mainly because I missed a couple spots on my first go around because the layered chocolate paint was so close to the espresso color. Once I was finished with both coats of paint and they were completely dry, it was time to move on to sealing my paint. As I've mentioned several times in the past, DIY paint is clay-based and porous, and so you definitely need to make sure and seal it. For these, I knew I wanted to go over them with some white wax, but I didn't want the wax to be overwhelming. And so I decided to go ahead and use a base coat of DIY's clear wax first. And so I'm just brushing that on with my soft bristle brush and then very carefully and gently wiping back the excess wax as I go. Once I'm done with that and I'm happy with how my candlesticks look, I am going to move on to the DIY white wax. And I'm using the same procedure to apply the white wax as I did the clear, just picking up a little bit with my soft bristle brush and then going one section at a time, adding a thin, even coat of wax to the candle holder. When I finish with a section, I just grab my dry shop towel and very gently, feathery light, just wipe back the excess wax. Once I'm finished with the white wax, these candle holders are done, and I just love the look of that white wax over that layered chocolate paint. two is this simple little wooden box that I pulled out of my stash in my garage at home. The first thing to do was get rid of the fruit on the front. So I grabbed my palm sander and some 150 grit sandpaper and just went to town, smoothing that out and getting rid of the fruit on the front. Then it was on to painting. Now, for this, I decided to try something a little bit different. I'm doing a blended technique using two colors. This is Cake Batter by DIY and Summer Crush by DIY. And I wanted this to kind of look a little bit like a sunset. So for my first coat of paint, I just added the colors where I wanted them, spritzed with a little bit of water, and then worked the paint into each other with my brush. I didn't do it perfectly the first go round. I just wanted to have a decent base coat, and I'll work the paint a little bit better when I go over it with my second coat. Then I painted the inside with the cake batter. And once I was done with that, I realized there was still some of that design showing. So I ended up having to sand off my paint and re-sand the front of it. And I actually used a little bit of shellac to seal it this time. Then it was back to my blending technique. So I'm just putting the cake batter right in the middle, and I'm actually kind of using a lot of paint. It's a pretty thick coat. And then going around with quite a bit of that Summer Crush just around the edges. And once I'm done with that, little spritz of water, and then I used my soft brush. This is a synthetic bristle brush, so it's got pretty soft bristles, and I'm just blending the paint left to right and then up and down to give this, again, kind of a look like a little bit of a sunset. Once I have the paints kind of blended together, I did add a little bit more of that cake batter right in the middle and kind of feather that out towards the edges. Then it was time to add another coat of the cake batter to the inside of this box. And once it was completely dry, I went ahead and went over it with some 220 grit sandpaper just to smooth out any edges, and where the paint on the corners had kind of globbed just a little bit, I wanted to sand those smooth as well. Then I went ahead and went over the bottom with some layered chocolate just to cover up the price that was still on there. And once that was all finished and my paint was dry, I actually took this to my sink and just rinsed it off really, really well, because I knew I wanted to put some transfers on it and I wanted those transfers to stick. Once my project was dry, it was time to start applying my transfers. Now, all of these pieces come from a transfer set by Redesign with Prima called Sunflower Fields. It's one of their older sets, but I actually do have one available on my website along with several other Redesign products, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. Once I figured out where all of my transfers were going to go, I start with the one that's going to be furthest away from you. So the very bottom layer, which is the leaf, and I laid that down first. And then I just worked in layers up on top of that. I love transfers because they're such a simple, easy way to add a beautiful pop of color and design to just about anything. And if you've never used one before, it's really simple. You just peel off the backing, find where you want your transfer to go, lay it down. I usually smooth mine out really well with my hand first, and then you use the transfer stick that's enclosed in each transfer to rub your transfer down into your piece while you peel back that piece of vellum. If you accidentally pull up some of the transfer with the vellum, you just lay it back down, re-rub that spot until your transfer is adhered. Once you have the piece of vellum completely removed from your transfer and it's nice and adhered to your piece, just go over it with another piece of that vellum and burnish it in. So just use it to rub over your transfer to smooth out any air bubbles and make sure that it is well adhered down to your project. Once I had all of my transfers applied, it was finally time to seal my piece. And for that, I chose DIY's Big Top. I'm just putting one good even coat all over. This will dry crystal clear with a little bit of a sheen, and it's a nice durable finish. I love how this little box turned out, and I hope you guys do too. My third and final project is this cute little wooden tray that I picked up some time ago, and I absolutely fell in love with these little metal handles. So I'm removing those because I don't want to paint them. I'm just leaving those black. So I'm just taking out all the screws so that I can set those aside. Once I removed the hardware, I realized there was some damage to this piece from the screws in the hardware, and there were some places where the wood had actually lifted a little bit. So I grabbed my handy dandy wood glue and a little bitty paintbrush, and I went around the piece, and anywhere there were chips or lifted wood, I put a little bit of glue and then used my hand clamps, and I had to improvise and use some binder clips to make sure that everything was held in place while that glue dried. Once the glue was nice and dry and I removed all my clamps, I needed to go in with a little bit of putty and fill some holes and gaps really quick. So I puttied those, let that dry, and then sanded everything smooth again. And once I was done with that, I wiped everything back down with a damp shop towel to remove all the sanding dust and get my piece nice and clean and ready for paint. Now for the paint on this, I had decided to use a new color to me. This is DIY's Fancy Farmgirl. It's a beautiful rich green. I absolutely love it. I don't honestly know why I have never used it before. And I had already chosen a transfer to go on this, and that was one of the reasons that I chose this particular color. Luckily, since this paint is so thick and highly pigmented, I did only have to put one coat of the Fancy Farmgirl on this tray. It really did give it great coverage. Then I flipped it over and did the bottom as well and set it aside to dry. I decided I wanted this piece to have a little bit of a worn look to it, so I grabbed a damp shop towel and I did some wet distressing. I went over the body of the piece really well, trying to get just a little bit of that wood grain to show through the paint in places, and then I did along the edges as well. Once that was done and the paint was dry again, I went ahead and sealed the bottom and the sides of this piece with some DIY's Big Top, let that dry, and then I went ahead and sealed the inside of it as well. Now, if you followed me for a while, you know I don't always seal my pieces before I lay my transfers down. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, I really didn't want to take a chance that this big, huge, beautiful transfer would get ruined. So I went ahead and sealed my piece first. Now, full disclosure, I should have waited for the Big Top to cure probably overnight before I started putting this transfer on it. I had only let this dry for 3 or 4 hours. It felt dry to the touch, but I had a heck of a time getting this transfer to lay down. It took a lot of rubbing and a lot of patience, and I had only put down half of it. So when I got to the other half, I did go ahead and set this aside to dry overnight before I put down the other half of the transfer. That half went so much smoother, you guys. So my advice would be, if you clear seal your piece before you put a transfer on it, make sure you give it ample dry time before you try applying that transfer. Once I finally had the entire transfer down, I cut off a little piece of that vellum and just burnished it in very well, making sure that there weren't any wrinkles or air pockets in my transfer. Now, it's always a good practice to seal your transfers and give them a little bit of protection. And for that, I am using DIY's Big Top again. You could also use wax or liquid patina for this as well. Then it was time to replace my hardware, and this little tray is finished. I absolutely love how this thing came out, and I really hope you guys do too. it from here for today, you guys. I hope you enjoyed my sunflower themed projects, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then of course, don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know which of the projects in today's video your favorite was. Just a reminder as well, any of the paint and products you saw me use today can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. Of course, I carry the full line of DIY paint and products, as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint, recycled decoupage papers, and Redesign with Prima. So please go check those out. And as I said in the video, I do have one of those Sunflower Fields transfers available in my shop right now. For Tuesday's video, I'm kind of waffling between a couple of different things. I was really hoping to have the dresser I've been working on ready for Tuesday. I just don't know if it's quite going to happen. So worst case, I will have a thrift haul for you guys. We are definitely going out on a junk run on Sunday. I have signed up to be a part of a big event over in Kootenai County with a friend of mine, and Reclaimed Cottage is going to be kind of hosting our booth, but there's 6 of us that are going in on a pretty large booth, and so I need stuff. And so we're going to go out and hunt for some stuff on Sunday. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure I will probably have a thrift haul for you guys on Tuesday. Anyway, have a great weekend. I will see you back here on Tuesday, and thank you so much for being here. I very much appreciate it. I'll see you Tuesday. Bye.